I'd like to welcome everybody to the work session today. This is our work session scheduled for 1:30 to 2:15 on the Sullivan Arena, 2016 net operating deficits. And you've got a copy of AR 2017-241 in front of you. Let's go over and endeavor ourselves for the record. You will start with you.
Coach Pete.
Forrest Dunbar.
Tim Steen.
Dick Training.
Amy DeMosky.
John Weddleton.
Chris Schutte, Director of Office Economics Community Development.
Joe Wood, Regional General Manager for SMG, Sullivan.
Red Dyson.
Okay.
And I lost her, but Renee Stewart, Contract and Grants Administrator.
Okay. Well, let's turn time over to you, Chris.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here to answer any questions. The work session was requested by both you and Assemblymember Weddleton, and so we are here with the operator of the Sullivan Arena and can answer any questions you've got about the 2016 and operating deficit. There's also any questions you have about 2017 and moving forward.
Chris, could you tell us basically the contract, how long it goes for, and the conditions that get us to this point where we have to make up deficits for its operation?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, the contract expires on. It was entered into on January 2015 and expires on 2020. So for another 3 years.
And it does require us to pick up any deficits?
Correct. It's important to note that when the contracts were created, the scenario that we're dealing with today obviously was not thought through at that time. That a loss of that magnitude would befall the Sullivan Arena. And so that is an area of concern for us, and one that we've been working to address with the operator of the facility. But yes, under the current terms of the contract, the assembly, the city is required to reimburse the losses at the Sullivan Arena.
And right now, that amounts to 588,000.
Correct. 588,999.
Okay, we got some questions for you.
I think John's question too.
John, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I guess a comment. Seems like an odd business that carries no risk. I mean, if you carry no risk at all, you maybe you make any money, but that's a pretty glorious way to run a business if you never have to worry about not losing money. That was sharing the risk makes sense, but zero risk.
Right. I mean, that's the contract that was negotiated in good faith.
With the Sullivan administration.
Through the chair, Mr. Wilson, one way to look at this arrangement is that the municipality has, both for the Sullivan Arena, the Nina Center, for many of our public facilities, we've looked at how can we get out of the business of managing these with municipal employees, municipal resources, and turn it over to the private sector to manage. In essence, while there is net operating loss for 2016 at this facility that we are reimbursing SMG for, truly they're not making any money off of it. While it does carry very little risk, it also carries no reward. And so that's something that to keep in the back of your mind. This is in essence $589,000 of the checks that they've written that they are asking to be reimbursed for.
I understand that, but I run a business and sometimes you lose money, you know, and that's a valuable thing because we're alert in the future. So if I could ask the next question.
Keep continuing.
What is the future?
Yep.
I mean, all the things that cause this, that 16 exist now. I mean, what are you going to do?
It's going to be a combination of things. Obviously, the ACEs underperforming in the last 3 years has ultimately led to their untimely demise. In February, where they would have the majority of the dates, the prime dates in the building, they were underperforming. So we really didn't have an opportunity to try to make up for that in 2016 just because we didn't have date availability. And what we're doing moving forward is utilizing those prime Friday, Saturday dates that we'll have now from October through April of every year. And we're starting to book concerts. We're looking at doing some local community events. We're also planning some event creating events. Our mindset is completely changing. Where in the past the building was pretty much driven with our two anchor tenants, the ACES and the UAA Seawolves. We've got a lot of work in front of us, but a lot of opportunity to got to make make up for the revenues and activity that the BACs brought. And we're starting to do that and seeing some success.
John, do anything else? I'm gonna go on down if you don't.
Yeah, I guess my thing is, that UAA center is your tough competition because it's so much nicer. I think it's a shocking boondoggle for a university who built that with that crisis. Is shocking. I couldn't believe they redid it.
Yeah.
But the state gave us back the sewer and highways patrol. Can we give it back to the state? We don't want to have it now.
Thank you, John. Coach?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm looking at this like, what else could we do to reduce the loss? And I was reading an article in the paper about the sports dome, and I'm going, well, wait a minute. Maybe we could bring some of the activities that they, were used for and bring those to Sullivan just to fill in for a few months while we kind of ramped up and came about sort of a change of how we're going to be doing business down there. Is that something you've considered?
Mr. Chairman, I'll start and then hand it over to Joe. Yes, some of them are Peterson. We're actively, or SMG is actively looking to capitalize, I hate to say it, on the deflation of the dome. One silver lining to this story is that there is an existing state legislative grant that was appropriated to the municipality for the future Mulcahy Stadium review project, which you're probably very familiar with, affecting the baseball fields there. That's a project that, as state dollars have dried up, has been pushed back to the later date pile in Parks and Rec's inventory. However, the money is still sitting there, and we recently wrote a letter to the state asking for permission to spend the balance on a number of projects that would support Sullivan and the Sullivan Arena and the parking lot area, which they approved. One of the key projects that we requested is turf purchases. So Sullivan Arena will soon have a competitive turf surface to help pick up some of the slack that exists right now in field-based sports. But I also want to add, moving ahead, that another thing that's happening that's a little bit different than past practice is that the Office of Economic and Community Development is a little more proactively managing this grant or this contract with SMG in conjunction with SMG. In fact, one of the things that we've instituted now as a result of this is a requirement for an annual business plan with quarterly metrics and quarterly objectives that have to be met. In the past, to be honest, the Sullivan Arena was largely managed by SMG, and we didn't have a very active role in it. And that was fine in the net positive years, but in the net negative years, I think we want to play a little more active role in helping to facilitate smart management of that facility. So Joe and his team have put together a business plan that identified a number of alternative revenue sources, and you've nailed one of those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Forrest.
You sort of, by implication, maybe answered this question, but I want to talk a little bit more specifically about the contract. Does the contract have a good faith or a good faith effort clause? Does it have something that requires SMG to go out and seek business? And this very much relates to what John was asking about risk. What is the incentive for them to really go out and aggressively pursue new business opportunities? And if they don't do so, can we obviate the contract?
To the chair, Mr. Dunbar, yes, the current contract, it should be important to clarify that the current contract is not a blank check. There are bumpers within the language of the current contract that does not require the operator, does not allow the operator to just run up the deficit willy-nilly. There are specific requirements on deviations from revenue and expenses based on their annual budgets, et cetera. So there are guidelines for how to keep this thing on target. Secondly, specific to performance enhancements or performance increases, there is a requirement in there that was added during the last contract amendment, but it's specific. Unfortunately, it's specific to hockey events, and there was a requirement that the operator look at ways of boosting events annually, so that year over year you're adding a new event or another match or whatever you want to call it. I don't think that that has the kind of teeth that both you and Assemblymember Weddleton are talking about. I do feel that the business plan, which is not specifically referenced in the current contract, but the business plan will, and in fact, we've been discussing with SMG a new contract amendment that would codify the requirement for the business plan and the requirement to meet the expectations of the business plan.
Can I ask a follow-up?
One more, and then I've got Fred.
So for you, Chris, but also for, I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Joe?
Joe, why would SMG agree to that?
Chair, Mr. Dunbar, this is their business, and while they don't make any money in its current form, they do want to see the center perform because that's where they do make their money. So if we enter into a mutually agreeable arrangement of increasing performance of the facility, they stand to benefit as much as the city.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, we're in the business of being partners with the facility owners that trust us to manage their facilities. We don't structure our contracts typically where we get paid a percentage just to do what we do. I mean, we usually do have some skin in the game in every management agreement that we work in. We don't expect to have a risk-free deal. We understand we have to perform because money's getting tight for every city, for every state, and we are throughout the nation and the world in convention centers and arenas and stadiums, and everyone's all public officials are in the same boat. We understand we need to do more with less, and we just don't sit and rest on our laurels and rack up losses and expect contracts to be extended or to be renewed.
Thank you, Chris.
Mr. Dyson, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson got to my question, and that is the dome and it's being out of shape. I've been in a bit on the engineering side of that one, and my understanding is not going to be rebuilt. So it's going to be, there's a long-term need for those bids, and it certainly ought to be some opportunities there for you all.
Absolutely.
And I think some folks are really scrambling.
They are. We're working with a lot of those.
You're ahead of me as usual.
Fred,
Tim?
as a follow-up on that, I thought I just heard recently that they were starting on repair of the facility. Now, is this a recent decision that they are not going to then try to repair it?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to define recent, but I believe that my information is pretty valid.
In the last couple of weeks, last week, I think, I heard a radio announcement that they basically were going to start the repair of it, but maybe they found that there was more damage.
So,
Chair, Assemblymember Steele, sorry to cut you off, Assemblymember Dyson. The ownership of the dome have requested a meeting with building safety. They had announced to the public and have been speaking about the dome for months, saying they plan to inflate it, but have had yet to come in and actually speak with the building department on what it would take, building safety, to actually reinflate that. And while I can't say for certain if they will continue or not to pursue it, they have set up their first meeting with building safety next week to begin the discussion about what it would take. But as Mr. Dyson mentioned, it's from an engineering perspective, it's going to be very challenging. And so they have a very heavy lift ahead of them, and I would not at this point guarantee one outcome over the other.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Continue. The question I had is that SMG managing the whole facility or just the Sullivan, the whole complex?
We manage the Sullivan and Benville.
Okay.
And then we also are contractually obligated through the Sullivan to maintain the parking lots.
It seems to me the whole complex has an issue that needs to be dealt with, and we spend a lot of money upgrading all the ice and everything throughout town. And I hope that I'm sure we're on top of it, and I hope that we're going to come up with some good plans. It's a fantastic facility, well located, and certainly a multi-purpose facility. But I'm real concerned for it, and I hope we find something good.
Go ahead, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my experience with the inflatable domes is my alma mater, University of Northern Iowa, had built an inflatable dome on top of their stadium, and it had a deflation situation, and they were going to try to reinflate it, but found out that the insurance company was not going to cover it unless they built a more permanent structure type roof, and so that's what they ended up having to do, and it was considerably more expensive than just reinflating the roof, and that may be the situation that the sports dome has found themselves in.
Well, the minutes reflect the tape that they were joined by Mr. Felix Rivera and Mr. Eric Croft. I kind of do have a question for you. I got an article here that they held the Northwest Cannabis Classic there at the Sullivan Sports Arena, and I want to know how that was done, because we have an Assembly Resolution 2016-189 that says it can't be done. Open consumption cannot be done in a city facility. So how did that happen?
I'll start and then let Joe finish. So, Mr. Chairman, yes, you're correct that public consumption is not allowed. And last year, that event was held actually at the Nina Center.
Yes, it was.
And by all accounts, it went very well. There was, of course, people were nervous about hosting that event inside the public facility, but it went very well. This year, the event organizer, I think, felt that an outdoor venue would be a better choice for it. And initially, there had been reports that they did plan to encourage public consumption. We were alerted by the Marijuana Control Board. Joe and his team did a great job of directly confronting the event organizers, making it very clear in the contract language that no consumption was allowed, reminding them of existing municipal laws, and they proceeded under that direction. We also received a copy of the Alaska Leaf magazine from Director McConnell, and all we can say is that that event probably will not be welcomed back next year for violating those terms.
Because when I read what she wrote, the people that put it on said it was nice because the first time people felt comfortable smoking, consuming at the event. And that concerns me because we're talking about a city facility, and I've got a copy here of 2016-189. I can make available to you if you haven't seen it.
So we're very familiar with it. The event took place in the parking lot at Sullivan Arena this year, which was
This does include parking lots.
Yeah. And Joe, and he can speak to this, but Joe's team was there to actively monitor the event.
Yes, and Senator Training, we actually appended all of the municipal statutes, the resolution, and the state law as Exhibit A, B, C, D, E, and F to the actual rental agreement that the organizers signed. And so there wasn't, and I agree with you. I mean, I believe their intent all along was,
Skirt it.
to skirt things. But, we did have a pre-meeting with APD about how to handle open consumption. It was similar to, we have speeding laws, people do speed. And we had roving pairs of event security that were walking through. If someone was openly consuming, they were told that was against the law, and he needed to cease, and anyone that challenged was removed.
Okay. Thank you, because when I get Eric and McConnell writing this, I get a little concerned about it. Chris, can you get us a copy of the ordinance you've got relative to SMG and any, you said you were doing an amendment to it?
Contract.
Oh, the contract, yes, sir.
I'd like to see it and make it available to the entire city.
Absolutely, yeah.
Amy, anything?
No, I just want to see the contract. Let me ask Renee. Renee, you're the contract administrator for SMG. Have you seen, or for this contract?
Well, for the facilities, but I just started a couple months ago, so.
Okay,
I'll try to answer it.
Okay, I'm sure between you and Chris, both of you can. As the contract administrator over this contract, have you seen anything that you would see or might qualify as a violation of the contract, which could lead to termination?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I'd add to that no, under the current terms, there's nothing. In fact, the Sullivan Arena has also been through the municipal audit process 3 times, Joe? At least 3 times, most recently in 2014, I believe was the last one. and always has come out with a clean report on their bookkeeping and accounting.
Also, it says here that the money will come out of fund balance, which I guess we've heard off and on. There's a little bit in there, it's dry. How much is in the fund balance?
So we're gonna be.
Lance has deep pockets.
So this fund balance will be coming out of our 2% emergency reserve. I have to check, but I think it's 8 million total in that 2%. Check the CFO.
That can't be tapped for sewer.
We have for anything with the administration, the assembly, and the CFO support.
How many votes do you have to have from the assembly to take it out?
Not done.
Just for the record, Lance, can you clarify maybe for some of the newer members that 10% and 2%?
Yep.
What it's for and the reason why we like to keep about 12%?
Sure, thank you.
I just don't want anybody thinking they're gonna get into the piggy
Right.
bank without a fight.
So the total amount of fund balance is, it's a percentage and a dollar amount of our previous year expenditures. And so what we do is we create a fund balance of 10% that's primarily for the purpose of preserving our bond rate. The 2% is an emergency pool of cash in the event of unforeseen things that we do not know are coming, whatever they may be. That 2% is part of that. It also helps shore up our bond rate. And then when we move into the next year, when we do our budgeting process, we make sure that the fund balance is then replenished. But its purpose was created for a purpose like this, and then that's why it requires the Assembly's approval and the CFO's approval. But thank you for the question.
Would you check and see if there's any restriction on how many votes we have to reach into that 2%? I don't think there is, but check it for us. And how much money are we talking about in that 2%? How much?
I think it's 8 million in the 2%, and then obviously the 10 is that times 5, so 40-something million.
Because I don't see next year getting any better when it comes to unavailable money. Forrest?
Well, yeah, I wanted to make a comment, maybe a question off of that. So I agree that this is what this is for. We didn't expect the ACEs to leave, and so this is an emergency in that sense. But if we can project forward and we think that there is a similar size deficit in the out years, or in the years to come rather, then in my mind, we can no longer justify reaching into the emergency account to pay for this, and we have to start building this actually into our budget, building this deficit into our budget. I don't have a question now, I guess. But maybe, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're exactly
Lance,
right.
what are you looking at for next year?
So, I mean, if I could answer Mr. Assembly Member Forrest's question. So you're exactly right. If we know that we're gonna have an expense, it's not a surprise. So we build a budget based on that, and so we have to make some reductions someplace else. And Chris, as well as the other executive managers, they know that that's the case. So it's not a surprise. And then, so that's exactly right. When we build 18, if there's going to be a number like this or a lesser number, then Chris and his team will come to me with that information. And then if it does show up, I will challenge him as to why he didn't know about it when he submitted his budget, because he should have known about it. That's the other. So, and Chris and I'm aware of this situation, and I know that he's looking at making sure that we don't run into a similar situation in the future. And if we do, we got to figure out how we're going to mitigate it with what he's got. And I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Lance, what's your projected deficit for next year?
Right now, it's around 20 million.
So, knowing that, where are you gonna find the extra money to shove this back into this 2%? Because we're all budgeted for it. So we're looking at $20 million deficit. That's not happy times, that's for sure. Any other questions on this issue? Mr. Dyson?
Yep, 2 quick questions. Is the city self-insured in liability for our facilities?
Through the chair, yes.
And our fund balances, is somebody actively managing those to make money off them while they're sitting?
Yes.
Who does that for us?
The CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, Robert Harrison, is staff.
All right. And lastly, I think Ron Emanuel said famously, never waste a crisis. And I just say that you all who are hands-on in it, Is anything that the city is doing that limits your ability to do well, or things we could change? I suspect all of us are pretty darn eager to at least get out of the way and help if we can.
But it's interesting you mentioned the Assembly investment because this body did exactly that last November, because our direct competition is the new state building across town at UAA, and under the old draconian rental restrictions with Sullivan Arena that had been in place, we could not enter the same types of rental agreements with promoters that they could, and pretty much precluded us from being in the concert business since they came into existence. Once this body changed that wording, we were able to book. You know, we saw what we had early in this year. We had 2 Chainz, we had Lil Wayne, we had I Love the 90s. We've got 2 Luke Bryan shows coming up, and now we've got Miranda Lambert. So thank you for allowing us to get back in the game.
Let the record reflect these are really bright and capable people.
Agreed.
Other question from assembly members? One thing for me, would you please get a hold of the Alaska Gun Collectors Association? They used to, gun collectors used to
Yes, sir.
have a show every year at the Egan. Tried to get into Nina, couldn't afford to go to the Sullivan, so they ended up having everybody drive up to this fairgrounds twice a year. I would like to save that much in gas, get a hold of them and get them to book here, so, because twice a year they flood the place with people coming in. I want to make sure it's done here and not on the Sullivan, the sports ground.
They'll be at the Sullivan in October.
Thank you.
Mr.
And next
Chairman.
year too in April.
I mean, they're already booked. They're coming.
Put it on my calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to bring up one additional historical fact that when Sullivan Arena originally opened, one of the tenants that was anticipated to be there was a Continental Basketball Association team called the Northern Knights. And the Northern Knights had been playing at West High for several seasons and actually won the CBA championship in the 81-82 season, but the franchise was relocated somewhere else by the time Sullivan had opened, and so that tenant that they expected to have from the beginning actually never played a game there.
Let's get a D-League team. Do that? I guess it's called a G-League now. Let's get a G-League team, NBA team.
Chris, how was the floor there?
How was the
In
floor?
years past, we've had to fix the floor. We did that a few years ago. How is it?
I'll let Joe speak to that.
It's wonderful.
Okay.
It was replaced in the summer of 2015, and it is 300 times more efficient than the previous Freon-based system and floor. And shame we're not going to be using it as often for hockey games, but
You went to
it worked
CO2?
out really well. Yeah.
With the CO2 system there?
Yes.
Well, that brings up one additional question,
Yes, Pete.
Mr. Chairman. I'm not a hockey coach, but I have heard that hockey teams sometimes have to get up at 6 in the morning or all sorts of odd hours of day and night to get ice time for practice. Would that be a profitable thing that maybe the Sullivan could get into, is leasing ice time to local teams?
Yes, Senator Peterson, we have done that pretty consistently over the last 5 years. Sullivan obviously is bigger than Ben Vokey, bigger than Dempsey Anderson, bigger than Fire Lake, so it costs more to open it up for public rental. So when we do it, we have the organizations need to block book in minimum 2-hour shifts. And part of the other issue with the other rinks is we operate under a court order. It's an ice allocation policy that was handed down back, I think, in '98. And the youth organizations that existed at that time were complaining back and forth about certain organizations getting more ice than others, and so they actually went to court and got a court order, and now there's a strict policy that we must adhere to in terms of which associations get ice and how much. I know there's an active movement right now amongst all of the current youth hockey associations to try to come to another agreement, because the rules as they existed with UA hockey under that old agreement don't hold true today. There are organizations that are getting allocations for teams that simply don't exist because UA hockey eliminated them. So hopefully we'll find some relief from that ice log jam through that. But yes, we also do take some of that overflow into Sullivan when it makes sense.
All right, great, thank you.
I've got 4 grandkids that play hockey, so I would appreciate it. The parents appreciate it. I'd get out and drive out of town to do that.
You can come on out to Eagle River, it's okay.
They play there.
Any other questions from assembly members?
Steve?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Dyson.
I'm kind of thinking out loud, so I'll phrase this awkwardly, but during a time when we're underutilized at the facility, can you give a discount, on an exception basis? And particularly for school kids, where the public purpose is served.
Sure. Yes, Assemblyman Tyson, in the Municipal Code 2511, which governs the policies, procedures, and things relative to Sullivan Arena, there is a particular clause in there that speaks to during times of historical lesser usage, defined as June, July, and August, and Sunday through Thursday, year-round, that we can offer discounted rates with the approval of the Muni to prospective users for first-time use, and also for nonprofits.
Yeah, well said. Sounded like there was some limitations in there a bit. And,
Yes,
and
there are.
yeah, and I think we would be open to any suggestions that could be helpful, and even do them, on, for a 2-year period or 3 with option to renew or something. And as anybody that's in the sales game knows, if you can get the customers coming, and used to it, the propensity for them to stick really goes up. And it's a marvelous facility with relatively easy parking and access, which lots of places don't have.
Mr. Steele.
Thank you.
How badly is UAA cutting into the graduation ceremonies? Did you have any this year? And so,
Well, they took their own.
but they took high schools too. I know Wes was out at UAA.
Well, but we had our 4-day block of the ASD graduations this year. I think for some of the bigger schools, they don't have enough capacity to host them there.
You mean at UAA?
Yeah,
At UAA, correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I spoke at Bartlett's there. It was wonderful.
And yes, we would hope that the Anchorage School District would keep their
Well, it
commencement
was-
ceremonies at the city-owned building.
It was packed at the UAA for the West Tiger graduation. It was pretty crowded.
Can I ask? Your graduation schedules for 2018 are already booked though, aren't they? Because they're on ASD's calendar at the Sullivan.
Yes.
So, okay.
I don't recall if
Well, I know Chudiak is. That's the one I really looked at.
I don't recall if I've received, typically a couple months after the school year is done, they will send me the formal letter requesting the dates when they are decided upon. And obviously they're a priority in booking.
Anything else from assembly members? Thank you so much for being here. I know it's not a pleasant time for any of us. So thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Work session over with. Next one begins at 2:15.